Hello and welcome to What's the BPM? This is a podcast dedicated to the history of Australian dance music. We will be chatting to the DJs, promoters and club owners who have been instrumental in growing this scene, from warehouse events to the major festivals we have today. So strap yourself in, subscribe to the channel, and there'll be more episodes dropping in the near future. Okay, welcome to the What's the BPM podcast. Kid Kenobi, good to have you here, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, this would be good. It's been a little bit of organising, but we finally got there in the end.
Yes, I think it's good timing actually.
Yeah.
Got the got the album out, so I got lots to talk about.
Yeah, wasn't you doing a book or something as well?
As well, yeah. So
Still happening.
got lots of little projects on the go. Yeah, and that's one of them. That's a big one actually.
Oh, awesome. Mate, before we sort of get right into it, what's the story behind your DJ name?
Look, I wish I had a very cool story behind my DJ name, but unfortunately, it was just me having to come up with a name for my first ever gig, which was in 1996. And back then I was I'd come from a hip hop background. Well, hip hop was sort of my first real passion musically. So the Kid is sort of like a reference to like a lot of the hip hop style names like Kid Capri, and stuff like that. So that was sort of an element of it. But then, I was always into like fantasy and sci-fi as well. So, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Star Wars was where the Kenobi came from. So I threw them together. And at first I wasn't like, wow, that's me. I found the name, but it was something about it that was quite catchy and I just couldn't get it out of my head. So I was like, all right, cool. You need to put my name on a flyer. Let's go with that. So
Yeah.
started there and it just stuck. I mean, it hasn't changed since.
Oh, well, it definitely it stands out, so you don't forget it. So that was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how did you get into DJing? You said it was 96. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still early on, but I mean, house music and stuff like that had been around for a little while.
Yeah, so look, I mean, musically, I was sort of getting into music, I really seriously, like, finding music that I was passionate about, I guess, around year 9, year 10 in high school. That was, like, 1990, 91. That was sort of, the first sort of waves of electronic music coming through, into the mainstream, I guess. So back then, I was just buying cassette tapes, but then also going and buying like the remixes on vinyl. And that wasn't with the intention of like wanting to be a DJ. It was more so just because I was like, awesome, I can get these remixes of tunes that I love and just for the love of it. And then a good friend of mine, DJ Q45, he started to get into DJing. And he was the first to actually buy turntables and like records more seriously. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I wasn't really sort of making that decision to go into DJing myself at that point in time. But then I think after I left high school, I'd been through sort of being into hip hop, then been through early rave culture. And then this sort of new sound was coming through, which was like trip hop and big beat. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my God, this is just like the best music ever. It combines, my love of hip hop with my love of sort of dance music and rave. And I was like really passionate about it. And started buying a lot more records and then just happened to buy an old belt-driven turntable from like, I guess a cash converters electronic store just up the road and, terrible to DJ with, but that just sort of evolved slightly organically in the beginning. And I think as soon as I started trying to DJ and mix some of the tunes together, I just got absolutely hooked. Like back then beat mixing was an art form, learning to beat mix, learning to recognize which track was faster and which track was slower. Like I became hooked on just trying to figure that out. And I think, it just evolved from that, it was literally just a bit of passion with a bit of just luck and coincidence, really.
And so you just started bedroom
Yeah.
DJing.
Yeah, so bedroom DJing and then, Tom Q45 was DJing and there was another friend of mine, Lafroy, DJ Ritual, and we were just all sort of into the same kind of music. And we just sort of jammed together and do, a lot of bedroom DJing or get a whole bunch of decks together and buy a case of beer and just do crazy hours of DJing on a Saturday night, And then another friend of ours, Will, who's DJ Goodwill, he was like, "Oh, you guys are playing some pretty cool music. No one's really putting events on with that kind of music. Let's just do a monthly on a Thursday night, just sort of for our extended friends and family, I guess, and uni students. And that was ended up being the first gig, Green and Jazzy in 1996. So that's where the first gig was actually, yeah. And that became a monthly thing, and then things sort of just progressed out of that, really.
And that was in Sydney?
Yeah, at the Burdekin Hotel, middle floor, second floor of the Burdekin Hotel. It was like $3 to get in. It's just a whole bunch of uni
Yeah.
students, and it was just like we had no idea what we were doing, you know? We were just basically saying, "Here's all our favorite records. We're gonna play them," and people came because it was just one of those things where you're doing something where you're passionate about it, but then it also resonates with what's happening, I guess, on a slightly wider circle, or scale musically. So it's just and no one else was really doing it. So, you know, it just sort of grew organically, I guess. But yeah, I think my first gig at Green and Jazzy was probably one of the biggest natural highs I've ever had. You know, I just couldn't believe people were actually dancing to this music and this music that I loved. You know, it was awesome.
You obviously had some talent there, so you could, like, beat mix, and
Yeah.
you kinda had a knack for it naturally, do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm sort of like someone who likes to perfect things once they, you know, decide that they want to do something. So for me, in those early days, I'd get 2 records, and I remember they were probably like the easiest records I could find to mix, which were like probably like happy hardcore records at the time. And I would just, you know, have one record playing and try and get the other one in time. And if it didn't get it in time by the time that record ran out, I'd take that record back to the beginning and try it again, you know? So I kept going and going and going until I got it, you know, and it became an obsession. So yeah, by that point in time, I think I could mix. I wasn't going out there train wrecking at my first gig, thankfully.
And so you're doing that kinda monthly, and your popularity's growing, and then it just snowballed from there.
Yeah, and I think at that point in time, there wasn't really a genre of sort of like breakbeat wasn't really a genre. It was sort of popping up in sort of some forms, but it wasn't like known as like, oh, this is breakbeat or whatever. But I kind of was picking up on this sound, and I was like, I really, really like this sound. And Tom and Lefroy were really into drum and bass, so they were playing a lot of drum and bass at these gigs with a lot of other stuff as well. But I was sort of like going, I really think I dig this sound because it was a bit more, I don't know, it was a bit more party, and I was really, I guess, I liked it because it was more around that house tempo, and it was just sort of, you know, when you find your groove and what you're down with, that was sort of where I was feeling it the most, and so I started playing a lot more of that, and I think because that sound fit really well with, you know, the house sort of scene, I guess, because it was similar tempo or, house DJs were playing it as well. It sort of I guess it opened the doors for me to be able to play some other events, you know, so from there, I can't remember what the first events that I started getting booked for were, but, you know, I started eventually getting booked by some bigger DJs at the time, like, you know, Sugar Ray and Phil Smart. They were putting on these love parties or tweaking events at Club 77, and they'd throw you on there, and, you know, you could sort of slot in because it was a similar sort of tempo. It wasn't like drum and
Yeah.
bass. Oh my god, that's just not gonna fit in here tonight at this sort of gig. So I think, yeah, it's sort of that's sort of where it sort of started progressing from, really.
And I'm thinking, I mean, at least in Brisbane, most of the major raves had, like, a breaks room in the late '90s, early
Mhm.
2000s.
Yeah, yeah.
So you probably got some, I'm sure I would have seen you at the big adventure raves in Brisbane.
I did do one of those actually, yeah,
Yeah.
way back in the day. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah, and
remember.
that, I mean, those rooms were always jammed. It was
Yeah,
very
yeah.
popular.
Yes, I actually that was probably one of my first interstate gigs, actually. Like, yeah, the adventure gig. Yeah, on the back
Yeah.
room. Yeah.
Well, they sort of, uh, they were in one big venue to start with, but then the event grew so much that they moved to, like, bigger, so they moved to, like, the RNA showgrounds, and,
Yeah,
it was
right, yeah.
enormous, sort of at the peak of it, it was just massive. That's probably one of the
Yeah.
ones you did.
Yeah, yeah, but that tended to happen in Sydney as well. Like, you would get, like, you know, like the love events that I was talking about, they used to have it was at the Metro in Sydney, so they had the main room, which was like house and tech techno, and then the back room would be sort of like all the other stuff, I guess, which was a lot of at that point in time was a lot of breakbeaty stuff, you know. So it was sort of like, when I guess when was that? 2000. So yeah, things like, Doom's Night when it first came out, or earlier than that, it was like High State of Consciousness, or those kind of
Yeah.
early sounding records. Yeah, so it was good though because it was those gigs were quite loose. People really went to party, so they were
Mm.
awesome. Yeah.
No phones, no evidence.
iPhones, just like, yeah, totally different mentality around dance music. Yeah. Yeah.
This might be a tough question to answer, but what do you think made you so popular in the, 2000s? Because you
Uh,
were one of the biggest, if not the biggest breaks DJ in Australia.
yeah. Look, I think one thing I would say is that I've often been very conscious of the dance floor, So even in the early days, I would go record shopping before I was even really DJing, and I would buy, you know, records, and I would buy some records which were just for me that I wanted to listen to at home that I didn't really care if anybody else liked. And then there'd be records that I was like, okay, this is going to be really good for a DJ set. This is what I want to play as a DJ. So I kind of always had this mentality of, what I like and what I like that will work for a dance floor, So I've always tried to be very conscious of, entertaining, I guess, a crowd rather than just going, "Hey, this is what I do, and I'm just gonna play this track and, probably will kill a dance floor, but, this is what I'm about," kind of thing. I've never really had that mentality, So
Yep.
I think that sort of, I guess that sort of really resonated from early on, really. I've always been very conscious of the dance floor and, entertaining, I guess, a dance floor, really. So and I think as well, I think success is always partly due to an artist and partly due to the time and the place, So I think a lot of artists who become successful aren't successful just because necessarily of who they are, but also with the wave, the music wave, the cultural wave that sort of they're riding as well,
Yeah.
So I guess I was into I was passionate about a certain style of music that was blowing up at a particular point in time. And it just happened to be those two things coming together. And I'd always, like I said, always try and aim to do the best job I could, always wanted to rock a dance floor, entertain the crowd. So, I guess that sort of resonated, at that point in time with people.
Yeah. Actually, when you're speaking then I've just remembered something. This is a pretty cool story. Uh, one of, my friends, you remember back in the day, the In The Mix forums were huge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
one of my mates from the In The Mix forums was a bedroom producer. I think he might have had a couple of tracks released at some point, but I'm not sure at this point, but he'd made this track. As far as, well, we didn't know who. I think I was probably one of the only people that had it.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
handful of us that had it right. But anyway, I went to Family Nightclub to see you DJ,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and in the middle of your set, you played his track.
Oh, okay. Was that Kid K Ferris?
No, it was I think the track was called Tribal Gathering.
Oh, that's right.
DKO, I think the
That's
name of
right.
his
I
artist
remember
name
that
was.
track.
But for the life, no one knew how you got a copy of that.
I don't remember either. He must have sent it to me.
Because I'm stood on the balcony and I'm like, geez, this sounds like Tribal Gathering coming in. And then it was, and I quickly whipped out, like, we had one of them Sony digital
Oh,
cameras,
yeah.
and I filmed it. I'm like, mate, he's playing your record. And then messaged him the next day. He was like, how did he get it? I'm like, I
Oh,
don't
really?
know.
You did that? Oh, God. Okay, then I don't know how.
Yeah, it's amazing. But
Oh, isn't
yeah,
that
I
cool?
just thought of that as you were speaking
I
then.
remember that record, actually. That was a good record.
Yeah, it
Really
was
good
rocking,
record.
eh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
sorry. Yeah, I went off
No,
a bit
that's
off
awesome.
track there. But like you mix so many mix compilation CDs. Like, how did you start working with the Ministry of Sound?
Look, I think that happened around the time that, breaks was really starting to blow up in Sydney. So I was resident at, a lot of the main sort of breaks clubs, like there was the Globe in Sydney, and there was also Beat Fix at home. So that was sort of like the main sort of, no pun intended, homes for breaks at no, sorry, it wasn't at home. It was at Sublime. Yeah. So that was sort of the main sort of nights at that point in time. And I guess because Ministry was based in Sydney, they were going, "Oh, look, maybe we should, dip our toes into that sound." And I guess they went, "All right, well, who's one of the bigger DJs playing it at the time?" And I guess, I was the one that they chose at that time. Yeah. So I think it was pretty kind of like, at the beginning, it was, I guess, quite easy because all I was doing for that first disc was going, what are the big tracks that I play week in, week out? To me at the time, it seemed really obvious, right? Because I was like, oh, these are the obvious choices because I know that when I play every week, these are the ones that people love, right? But I think even then, I was probably had not watered it down, but toned it down a little bit because I didn't want to do the obvious stuff. Because I think back then, DJ still wanted to be cool and underground, and like not be
Yeah.
too commercial and all that kind of stuff. And I think Tim from Ministry was like, "Oh yeah, it's cool, but have you got any, something you can sort of funk it up with or you party it up a bit more with or something like that?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, cool. I guess I could throw a couple of those tunes on that." I was probably thinking at the time like, "Oh no, they're too obvious." But that was actually a good lesson in how to really put something together on a more commercial level, because I think I was only thinking about the people that were going to the clubs week in, week out in Sydney, whereas he's thinking about, who's going to buy the CD around Australia who might not have even heard this stuff before. And, a lot of people hadn't, and it was a lot of people's introduction to that sound. And, it's wild. Like 30 years later, people still talk about those CDs or
Yeah.
still release about those CDs. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
I was going to say they were like massively popular.
Mm,
Yeah, I
yeah.
see the promo stuff for them everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone I knew had the CDs. Like, yeah,
Mm,
crazy. So
yeah.
popular.
Yes, it was wild, and it was a very laborious process, because back then I was still relatively new to producing, so I was beat mixing them all on a turntable and then recording them all individually into Pro Tools, and then without any sort of quantizing, matching them up, because back then Pro Tools didn't have quantizing, it was more just like an editing tool. So I'd actually have to go in and chop almost every bar up and then line everything up and get it all in place. And then, Cameron MC Shawshock did vocals for it. So then I was going through hours and hours of recordings of vocals. Like we did basically a live jam session in Brisbane. Um, uh, and we recorded 4 hours of that with Journeyman, the drum and bass DJ. And then I had to go and take all these 4 hours of recordings and then try and fit them into the right place. And I guess some of them fitted it in the right place and were done over the right tracks, but some of them weren't. And I guess some of them are probably even out of key. Didn't know too much about being in key back then, so
I don't think not many people did they?
No, no, no. Like, I mean, I think you knew something was out, and you're like, doesn't sound as this mix doesn't sound as good as that last mix," but you don't register, "Oh, that's because this is in key and this isn't." So, anyway, it was a big job.
Yeah, well, yeah, you had a great run with them. But so you spoke about productions there. So when did you get into making your own music?
Well, look, I mean, the first time I got into a studio really was with Tom Q45, and we did some mucking because he was, Tom Q45. He's always been the guy he's always been. I always joked he's always been like 20 years more mature than me, right? So he's always been getting into things before me, and I'm sort of like don't get it until like a couple of years later. I'm like, oh, DJing actually would probably be a good idea, or producing would probably be a good idea, and he's already done this for like 5 years or whatever. So we'd done some stuff together, but then as far as releases go, it was when I got into the studio with Poxy Music, and we did the La La Land remix, which was I think 2002. But back then I was sort of just dabbling here and there with doing stuff on Pro Tools and wasn't really finishing music. I was just getting beats and grooves together, I think. So then I did a little bit of music with them, but that was more just sort of sitting in the studio and, Samir was doing all the actual production. But it wasn't anything until like 2008 where I really said, right, I've got to, if I'm going to do this, I've got to put some time and energy into it and got to learn this stuff properly. So I think that's where it really sort of started, 2008. So it's kind of weird because my DJing and my like my DJing popularity and my producing sort of journey were really out of sync. Like it would have been better if I was producing at, the real peak of my
Yep.
DJing career. But I was very much of the mentality like, no, I've got to learn it myself and I don't want someone else producing my music and I've got to do it all myself, which at the time my manager was like, come on, just get some music out. You got to put it out now. And I was quite stubborn about it. So yeah, anyway, it was about 2008 where I think I really started getting serious about it. And yeah, you know, for you or for anybody who's done production, it's just epic journey. It's a really, really huge learning curve. And, it probably takes you 5 to 10 years to really know
Yeah.
properly what you're doing, I guess. Yeah.
No, I've never done any. Well, I mean, I've sat in the studio with
Mhm.
like, with producers, and I just look at it and think, oh God, you just get lost. It's yeah, it's something else.
It's because, the hard thing as well is that you're learning the technical side of things, which is actually how does this sequencer work? How does this plugin work? What does the EQ do? What does blah 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 or what all that stuff do? But then you also got to learn music theory, like
Yeah,
what is a chord? Sections in music and melodies, and what makes what makes a song good or makes a track work on a dance floor. Like you don't, it's just so many different things to learn, so many different parts of your brain that'll have to come together, so it's huge. Yeah, it's huge.
yeah. I mean, well, I was thinking back in the early 2000s, you were probably touring so much that you wouldn't have had much time to be just sitting for hours and hours and hours in a studio.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I
you're
mean, that was
gigging
yeah.
I mean, from what I've heard from other people I've interviewed, that Sydney, especially,
Mm.
you could, if you were a professional DJ, you could literally do like, 10 gigs a weekend because there
Yeah,
was just so much happening.
it was actually, particularly, yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. You would easily be doing seven gigs a week, and that wasn't just like you know, they were proper club gigs. You could
Yeah,
do on a Friday, three on a Saturday, one on a Sunday. Like it was thriving. It was really, really
yeah.
thriving. Yeah, it was
So you
great.
probably a couple of days of that the week, you're just recovering, especially if you're partying as well.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was quite straighty 180 actually, and then after that, started going off the rails for a little couple for a few years there. But yeah, like unfortunately though, the good thing about would have been producing back then would have been like getting to road test the songs out so much,
Yeah,
because that is actually like you can sit in the studio and you can write a tune, you can go, yeah, this is awesome. This is, yeah, loving this. I'm like, whatever. But then you can take it out and you won't know if the track's working or not until you play it out. You just
yeah,
don't. Like you just,
yeah,
it's a really weird thing that it's only actually in the environment that it's designed for that you will know for sure if that track works or not, and you'll know straight away where the problems lie, what needs to be emphasized, what goes on for too long, all that kind of stuff. You won't know that until you play it out. So yeah, the actual road test is really where it counts. So I would have had a lot of opportunities. I would have probably been writing some bangers back then.
Well, you definitely did. Do you wanna tell us a bit about the La La Land remix? Because that blew up.
Yes, that was again, it's interesting when you first come to something, even if it's quite naive, I think you come to it with quite a strong and powerful perspective. Like for me back then, I was just like, I know what's working on the dance floor. I know what I want to play in my sets. This is what people are doing, and let's do this, right? It was really obvious to me. I was just doing again the obvious thing, right, at that point in time. And Samir, I guess, because he wasn't DJing week in, week out, or wasn't as familiar with the breaks records as I was like, oh yeah, cool, that's a good idea. Oh yeah, okay, we'll try that. It was a bit more like, yeah, he was a bit more trying to sort of understand where I was coming from, I guess. But um, so yeah, I came with that freshness of like, I know what works. Let's do this. I know this will go off. And so yeah, and his amazing production skills and Ken's input and production as well was it was just a really good combination, and I think there was just a few different things about it that just sort of really just gave it that little bit of an X factor. And I think when you're writing music, you're always looking for that X factor. Sometimes songs don't really pop or don't become mainstays in your set unless they have that X factor. And you can't always just produce that. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. But I think that had the X factor of the vocals, obviously, the whole lyrics about pills, which people were loving at that point in time.
Mhm.
The crazy breakdown, which was very popular in that style of music at the moment. And I think also it's only a small thing, but I think the way the bass line changed from the first drop to the main drop, and it was only just slightly shifting the bass over or moving it forward a little bit that gave it a different groove. I don't know, it just gave it that punch as well on the drop. So there's just a few different factors to it that were just like ticking lots of boxes. And obviously breaks is quite big at that point in time. So lots of DJs besides breaks DJs were playing it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Did you just start noticing that like heaps of big DJs were playing it?
Yes. I think, we got the feedback from Fatboy Slim at that point in time, and he was like, loving it. And I was like, wow, that's just, not something
That's
that,
insane. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, it was wild. And
I
I
mean,
think,
yeah, if you search that on YouTube,
mm,
it's just like the comments are pretty awesome.
I have to check it
People are
out.
like, "Oh, I love this tune."
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, yeah,
I think it's one of those iconic tunes that has been like, one of the defining tunes within dance music over the years that people could still play now and people would still be familiar with.
yeah,
So that really helps as well. Yeah.
yeah, cool. So at what point did you just decide that you're just gonna start playing the music that you really love? I mean, it's difficult being especially when you're at the top of the game like you are, you're always kinda trying to stay ahead or, like, trying to stay in the market. Like, at what point do
Yep.
you
Yeah.
just go, "I'm just playing what I want from now on"?
Well, you know what it was? It was when I came up to my 20th anniversary of DJing. And I think I'd spend the first 20 years of my career doing exactly what you just said, basically, of like, I've got to stay relevant. I've got to stay up to date. I've got to stay cutting edge. I've got to be, doing the new thing all the time. And I think there's two things. One, I think once you reach a certain level of popularity, you kind of don't want to lose that and you want to stay there and you want to maintain that.
Yep.
And then I think your focus shifts from doing what you do to maintaining the popularity. And then you start making really bad decisions like, oh, maybe I should change my style and I should start playing more of this or playing more of that. And, I don't really love it, but isn't this what people want now? Shouldn't I be playing this style? So I think I had a bit of an identity crisis once the popularity of break started waning. And then the electro house thing was coming through. And I think I probably thought, oh shit, okay, you know, if I want to keep DJing, I've got to start incorporating more of this, right? So I started doing that, but I think the problem was I didn't balance it very well, and I think I jumped ship almost, like took too much on and sort of left a bit of my other sound out too much, and that really pissed off a lot of my old fans. But then it kind of kept you relevant and kept you getting bookings in places that may not have booked you if they went, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
still breaks DJ. Oh well, isn't that not cool anymore?" Kind of thing. And so yeah, I think you go through these waves of like, oh, I've got to keep up to date and keep abandoning that sound and do what's new. And then dubstep came along, and then bass music came along, and I think I kept trying to do that for ages. And I was also producing towards the latter stages of that phase. And my production was sort of similar to that. So I would be like, okay, this is big right now. I'm going to start writing music like that. Or I'm going to start trying to write music that all the big cool DJs are playing, so they'll play my music. Um, but the reality was, I wasn't playing any of those songs I was making myself. I would be like playing them. I'd be like, I'm not really in love with this track. I wrote it because I thought it's going to fit in, kind of thing. So I just wasn't playing any of my own music, which was sort of like really weird. It was sort of like, what's the point? And then it got to my 20th anniversary of DJing, and I'd been through all that, and I was like, well, do I make a make some noise about having been a DJ for 20 years and risk people going, "Oh man, what? You're so old. You've been DJing that long. Oh God," the stigma of being, an older DJ or being around for so long. I was like, "Oh, do I do that? Do I make noise about it? Or do I just pretend it's not happening and keep along this path of I'm going to be contemporary?" And I thought, "Oh, well, you know what? Stuff it. I'm going to lean into my history more, and I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to be, I guess, accepting of who I am rather than trying to pretend that I'm this guy that's always new and fresh all the time." And it just so happened that coincided with Ministry doing their first ever reunion party, which is where all of their events that they do now sort of spawn from. And so that was, all the classic kind of Ministry DJs and the Pump DJs are playing, and it just was this this beginning of this shift where it was actually okay and cool to be an old school DJ, And I was like,
Yep.
well, that sort of worked out well because that's sort of where I was going with it anyway. And I always had these fans, older fans who'd been following me for years, and I knew what they wanted and I knew what they loved about what I'd always done, but I'd always trying to be like, holding it back because I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do the old stuff." And I was like, "You know what? Stuff it. I'm going to do some mixtapes of older classic stuff and then playing some older tunes at the Ministry gigs." And it just sort of changed the trajectory of where I was going. And then I think that, long story short, that influenced the music I was producing because I was like, "You know what? I'm doing these like revival gigs, mixed with getting booked to do other gigs, and I want to have some newer stuff that reminds me of the older stuff, but that I could play, to a more modern dance floor." And so I started just writing tunes for those types of sets, for my kind of sets that I was playing at that time. So I just thought, you know what? I don't have enough good funky breakbeat. I need some fresh stuff that suits my set. So I started just writing some of that. And it was very simple. I was just like, I want to write stuff for my sets that works in my sets because I know people dig what I do as a DJ. You know, they'll probably dig what I do as a producer if I write for those sets. So I did that, and then I played those records all the time. Which was like totally the opposite of where I was beforehand. And then I started mixing that with doing reworks of older tunes, and it just became this thing of like, I'm doing my own sound, and it's at the point now where basically my entire kind of set pretty much is just all my own stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not because I want to be like, "Hey, I play all my own music." It's just because that's my sound. But now I know how to make it into as a track, kind of thing. So yeah, it was just sort of like making that shift from focusing on who I am and what I want to do as a DJ as opposed to trying to please other people or other producers, And it's been awesome, And speaking of Fatboy Slim, like he's actually dug a lot of that sort of funkier stuff as well, and he's given me really
Yep.
good feedback. Man, I did some reworks of some of his classic tunes, and he got behind those as well. So I was like, it's funny, once you start doing your own thing, it's sort of like it tends to flow a lot better.
Works better.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
So,
a big lesson.
how do you go about like remixing a classic for today's market without kind of, butchering it?
Oh,
It's a hard thing to do, hey?
I think it's, I always tend to go with tunes that I think I could bring something to, I think if a tune is really, really good already, and I don't see that there's any room for improvement, then I'll probably won't go there, but I usually choose tracks where I'm like, "Oh, I really like that tune, but I wish it did this, or I wish it had that, or
Okay, yeah.
I wish it was a bit faster, or, I just wish it was more DJ friendly, or just if there was some angle that I had, then that's the tunes I usually go for, or have done in the past. Yeah, so that's sort of what I would go for. And in the past, it's been quite tricky actually, because the way I would do it is I would get on Who Sampled Who. I'd like find the track that I want to remix, and then I go through the samples they used, and then I try and go and get all those samples and try and almost build the tune from the ground up again. So
Right.
it was quite laborious, but now these days, it's crazy how much stuff has changed in like the last sort of 2 or 3 years. Now you get stem splitters, so you can get any track and it will split that track into all its individual, stems like drums or bass or vocals or whatever. So you can actually now just like stem split a track and then just remix it from those parts.
That's amazing, hey? I've seen a
It's
bit of that on
wild.
Instagram. Crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a bit easier these days. I mean, they don't always sound great, but it's definitely a lot easier than trying to collect all the original samples, that's for sure.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of like specifically breaks and the scene in Australia, what's some differences that you can think of from how it sort of started to where it is now? Like, you think it's healthy or on the
Uh,
right path?
yeah, look, I mean, I think in general, I find that these days, I think back in those days, genres were really, really, really important, and people tended to follow genres even more than they followed DJs. I think, in those early days, you were like into a certain genre of, say, dance music. It's like, I'm into breaks, and here's my favorite DJs. Whereas I think now, the way that I look at dance music, it tends to be very artist focused, and the genre is almost secondary. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, I love, James Hype. What does he play? Oh, plays tech house, but then he might shift and start. Down the line play Afro house, but they followed the artist. They're not really so much
yeah,
worried about, oh, but now he's playing that genre. I don't follow him anymore, kind of thing. Like
yeah,
it's. I don't know. I think it's a very yeah, it's different in that respect. So I think yeah, I think the whole genre thing I find just, yeah, very different these days in terms of how dance music operates. And, I wouldn't really necessarily say there's even a breaks sort of scene at all anymore. And I think it sort of tends to ironically, this might contradict what I was saying, but it tends to hover around when, events are put on with all the breaks artists, So
yeah,
like particularly if the UK guys tour, then, the events will start happening and, you know, everyone will sort of come out of the woodworks. But it tends to be, I guess, a bit of an older crowd really. And a lot of people who used to go out then coming back out. But there are sort of definitely younger DJs who are playing sort of like, garage or two-step or that kind of stuff who, will incorporate a bit of breakbeat as well, but I don't think it's like a genre scene type thing is like what it was back in the
yeah.
day. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any Aussie DJ, like up and coming Aussie DJs that you like or you got your eye on or
There are actually.
producing good music?
Yeah, there are. There's quite a few of the garagey guys, and a lot of them are sort of looked after by the same agent as I am. And I also am really a big fan of Kenny Beeper, who's in Brisbane, who does a lot of break stuff as well, and a lot of stuff that that I'm really into. So yeah, there's definitely sort of a few bits and pieces here and there, different artists.
Cool. And they're on the same agency as you. You
Yeah,
got to mentor them, steer them in the right way.
do some collabs.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. What's your thoughts on it's a big topic at the moment, I know, but what's your thoughts on AI? You think it's a threat or use it to your advantage?
Look, I think it's a double-edged sword. I definitely think it is a threat and it is taking away from a lot of things that have been in place for a long period of time. There's no denying that. Like it is a massive, massive change. And look, I will admit that I am a huge fan of it and I use it a lot, particularly for my visual work. And I before I was really, really into music and DJing, like, doing art was my real thing, particularly in high school, like drawing. I was always like, you know, the best drawer in the class or whatever, and used to go into Art Express and, came first in art in year 12 and all that. That was my thing back then. Um, and so I'd sort of let it wane for 20 years or whatever, and then wanted to get back into it more recently because I was like, it was a nagging thing of like, oh, I should be doing it. I should be doing it. So I started getting back into it. And just at about the same time that I started getting back into drawing, AI art popped up. And I was like, you have to be kidding me, right? Just when I'm back into it, there's this whole new technology that comes through, which is, I guess I felt undermining my attempts to get back into art. And I was like really pissed off. A, because of that, but also because I thought it was actually really cool. And I thought, wow, this is really new and different, and actually quite like it. So I was really quite pissed off about it. So I thought the only way to deal with that is to actually have a go at it myself, right? I feel like, you've got to know your enemy almost to a certain extent. I feel like if you embrace something, it feels like less of a threat because you understand it and you actually know for sure how threatened do I need to be by this thing, so I started experimenting really straight away, 2022. I started experimenting with a lot of AI visual stuff. And back then it was really totally different to what it is now. You couldn't really even get a realistic person out of AI. It was like you'd write a prompt and be like, oh, God, that's weird, but it sort of looks like what I was going for. And it was kind of cool, actually. It was kind of like really abstract kind of art. And I kept on experimenting with it. And then I think for me, I was like, wow, as soon as the video element started coming along where you could turn an image into a video, I was like, I just saw that and I was like, yeah, this is the shit. This is where it's going to go, because particularly because I don't know, I think because it fitted so well with music, because, moving pictures works so much better than stagnant pictures with music because it's both like,
Yep.
got that movement. So yeah, and then I started putting some of that visual stuff to my music, and I just completely obsessed. I just absolutely love it. Because prior to that, when I wanted to do like a music clip, I would be like getting stock footage and trying to piece together bits and pieces, and it was horrible. It was like just the most worst. Like stock video is just terrible. It's just so cheesy and so unartistic, and I don't think I felt like I had the capabilities to go out and film all this stuff myself, or budgets or whatever. So yeah, it was like the perfect solution for me because I could make stuff that was artistic and also, fresh and suited my music. So I've been really, really big into like the video element. Um, and I think, that I guess when it came to the visual side, like, uh, you know, I get on the one hand where the artist fear comes from because, drawing is very personal to me and I've drawn my whole life. And there is an element where I guess where AI can do drawing. Okay. So it can sort of like negate the need for someone to draw, which is sad. Right. But I think at the same time, a lot of the AI artists that I follow on Instagram and so on, they're doing stuff that I've never seen before. And I think that's where the real revolution is. I don't think the revolution is going to be in like, oh, let's use it to replicate Picasso paintings or, Leonardo da Vinci drawing or something like that. It's going to be in creating new things that we haven't seen before. And a lot of the time when I
Yeah.
follow AI artists, I'm like, wow, oh my God, like I've never seen that before. And the analogy I have for it is like, the 303, Roland 303. That was
I
a
was just going to say the exact same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
originally designed to be a baseline, synthesizer for bass lines, right? And so at that point in time, I guess a lot of bass players could have been going, oh, far out, this instrument's going to replace us as bass players. But then someone figured out a way how to make acid out of this machine. And then acid was born. And I think that's the way we kind of need to be looking at AI art. Not how can we replicate bass lines, but how can we make acid? That's the kind of mentality that
Yeah.
what's there to gain rather than what are we replacing? But look, at the same time, I get it. I totally get the fact that it is going to replace a lot of traditional art forms, and I even think, when I want to draw now, like there's this voice in my head that goes, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point in drawing anymore? Like, and I'm not saying that as I think that there's no point to it, but just that thought now comes into my mind of like, what's the point? And I think I then realized, oh, yeah, okay, I guess there's no need really, but at the same time, I love it and I enjoy it. So that's the point, and I think that's sort of, I guess another way to look at it, if you love doing something in a traditional way, then keep doing that. Like, my daughter, she's gotten into playing the drums, and she likes a lot of 2000 sort of rock music. And I'm sitting here writing electronic music and
Yeah.
video with AI, and she's still doing that. So, I think there's room for all of it as at the same time. But
So true. Yeah.
And I think the other thing I realized is that whether you like it or not, it's here and things are changing. And I don't want to say that like in a mean way and like you got to get on board or you'll be left behind type thing. But the one thing I have realized in being in the arts for like and music for like 30 years is like change happens and it doesn't care about how you feel about it. It just happens and you kind of have to push yourself to embrace it. I had to push myself to embrace AI visuals in the beginning because I was so angry about it. But you kind of have to push yourself to embrace new things. And, it really struck me once when I was on this AI artists, and I use that in inverted commas because a lot of people are like, oh, they're not artists, so I don't know what to call them then, but AI creators. And she'd done this video AI piece, and then she made the soundtrack using Suno, which is an AI music program, right? And I was just like, oh my God, okay, this is full on. This is like total AIsville right now. But then I looked at the comments and there's all these people going, oh, I love the visuals and I love the music. And she's like, yeah, I'm putting it on Bandcamp. And like, oh, cool. I can't wait to get it. And I was thinking to myself, wow, okay. I could be sitting here debating, whether I think this is a good thing or a bad thing or should this be happening or shouldn't. And there's generations of people coming along going, oh, I don't even care. Like,
Yeah.
I like that music. I want it. And I'll get it off Bandcamp. Don't give a shit if it's made by AI or not. And I think the reality is that will happen over time,
Yeah. It's
right?
it's happening. Yeah. It's going to happen.
It will
Yeah.
change, and whether I like it or not, that will happen, So, yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes you gotta
Well,
embrace.
the thing that come to my mind when you said the 303, I was thinking of the drum machine. Like all the drummers were blowing up about that, saying this is
Yeah,
rubbish. It's got no
yeah, yeah,
soul. It's the same thing, really, isn't it?
yeah, and look, I guess the real challenge with AI is that it is intelligent to a certain extent, so it's doing things on its own, whereas I guess a lot of tradition like, even with the 303, you're the one that still has to tweak the knobs and create the sound. Whereas now, I guess the difference is with AI, and the big change is that it's doing it, and you're deciding
Guiding
if
it.
you like it or not. But
Yeah.
you know, I think it's very easy to think that it's all the AI doing it, right? It's all just AI, right? But you know, there's two ways to look at that. It's the same, I guess, with it's very the way I look at it sometimes is very similar to DJing, like DJing, you're not writing or performing music live. You're like a band would have been doing. You're taking created pieces of music and you're putting them together in a particular order and structure, and that's your art form, and we're cool with that, right? And I think creating works with AI is very similar because you're asking the AI to create something and you're making creative decisions on yes, no, how am I going to put that all together? What am I going to present? Kind of thing. And for me, it's very similar in a way to DJing. It's like being a selector, right? Eh, so that's one way of looking at it. Um, and I've forgotten the other way. I can't remember now.
No, I'm with you. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's just you've like it or not, got to embrace it. So well,
Yes.
and I've never heard that explained so well as you did before about the art thing. You were saying, "Oh, it's going to replace." We're all worried it's going to replace, someone who paints
Mm,
portraits or
mm.
whatever, but it's going to do something that we've never seen. It's going to be off the chart, something we've
Yeah,
never ever
yeah.
seen before. So
And I think that's what the focus should be on, like, how does it evolve, art and music as opposed to how does it steal from the past? I think people, kinda tend to be looking backwards a little bit with that mentality.
mm,
I get the threat because there will be people, without doubt, and I totally understand that this is sad, that will go, "Well, I'm not gonna hire this artist or I'm not gonna hire this painter because I will just do an AI version of it," right? That's a
yeah,
reality. But, okay, this is my other point was that, you know, we're always, to a certain extent, getting superseded by things, like in the beginning of the podcast, we're talking about, in the beginning, I had to learn how to DJ by learning how to beat mix over and over again. That was a skill that I had to learn that I spent months trying to master. And now we've got a sync button. So all that skill and practice and all that stuff, it's what was that for? It just got replaced by a button. So
Mm.
I think it's part and parcel of technological evolution that things do get replaced, particularly by technology. So I guess, that's just part of the way things are. And I guess I do also get that, AI is more of a threat because it tends to have its own skill set, like, to a certain extent, or be able to do things on its own.
Mm. Yep.
Mm.
It's definitely interesting with the
Yeah,
AI topic because people have their some people are like embrace it, other people are,
I know.
really, really worried about it, but
Yes.
it's
Well,
here to stay.
but the other thing is like, I've seen the anger die down more so with the visual side for some reason. I don't know if that's just me, but the hate towards AI generated images is less now, and I don't tend to get any pushback really when I share my videos that I've used AI tools to create, right? So I don't tend to get like, oh, this is shit, this is not real, or whatever stuff about that visual side anymore. But I'm noticing a lot of anger when it comes to the music, AI
Yeah.
music things. Like that's really heated at the moment. That's really, and I don't know why that is actually, but I guess you know.
Dance music fans are pretty famous for being pretty jaded
Yes,
with
but
everything, eh?
I guess maybe because it's more apparent that you're replacing a human. Like if with music, you strongly identify with the performer or the singer. So when someone's singing, must be some like instinctual sort of connection that you have with the vocalist and that human connection. And then to go, oh, that's not a real person singing, that's AI generated. That just throws everything right out. I mean, I'm still not sure how I feel about it either.
Mm.
I'm not saying I do use some AI music tools, but you know, I'm still on the fence about it as well to a certain extent. And there's a lot of hatred towards AI generated music as well. But it's also a growing industry that the major record labels want to get in on as well. So
Mm.
if you look where it's potentially going, it's like they don't really care about my feelings, I guess. So I don't know. It's a weird one, that one.
So true. Let's talk about your Second Skin alias.
Yes.
You've got some beautiful music.
Oh,
Hopefully not AI created, but you've
it's,
got some lovely music on SoundCloud
it's
under
all
that alias.
yeah, it's all AI generated, all of it. Just all with the no, no, no. Yeah, so look, that's the kind of music I've always really wanted to write, and I think it goes back to what I was saying before about I used to buy some music for me and some music for the dance floor, and so the stuff I used to buy for me was very much along those lines, along the deeper, emotional, reflective kind of side of things. And even back, I guess, when I was doing my ministry CDs, I would, do 2 discs, and one would be the deeper one, and one would be the dance floor one. So it's an outlet for that kind of music, and ironically, I find that music comes more naturally to me, and it probably comes naturally to most people really because it's more, "Here's what I feel." I'm not constrained by, "Is this gonna work on a dance floor?" I'm just gonna put what I feel and what I love out there. And you can just you can make creative decisions based on purely on emotion, whereas I think sometimes with dance music, you have to go, "Oh, I really love that, but, oh, nah, it takes the energy out of the tune. That's not gonna work on the dance floor." So you've
Yeah.
always gotta be like, constrained. There's a lot of rules, right? So yeah, that's just an outlet for that kind of music, really. It's music that I love writing, which unfortunately always is a struggle to get to because when you have a career DJing and playing club tracks, then that always takes precedence. So it's one of those things where I'm always trying to get to doing more of it, but you know, don't always get the opportunity. But yeah, it's probably my favorite music to write, really.
Oh, well, if you're watching, listening, check the links in the description. I'll put all your links in there, but check out the Second Skin
Yes, awesome.
links. Another question I had for you was, you've been DJing for what, nearly 30 years?
Actually, oh, what year is it? 2025.
Yeah.
It will be my 30th year of DJing. Yeah.
Yeah, like what keeps you motivated to keep DJing?
Um, Look, I think I feel quite lucky in a way because I don't feel I feel I've been granted almost like a second life in a way by these recent sort of resurgence of, you know, um, old school orientated parties or parties that geared towards a sort of like an older crowd or, you know, i- it's been really cool because it's sort of it's given me opportunity to do what I love to people who have supported me for 20 years or whatnot. So, I think and I just feel like people of that generation have a really sort of such a different perspective on dance music and such a deep appreciation of dance music that is so touching. Every single time I'll go and do a gig, just the love that you feel from people is really just like, wow, it's such a gives you such a strong sense of self-worth, that, what you've been doing has really meant something to a lot of people, so
Yeah.
that keeps you really inspired. And I think just intrinsically, I love music, and I don't think that's something that will ever die, so I'm almost gonna, never run out of passion for it really, whatever form that takes, if clubs started becoming crap and, there was just no gigs left or, the older fans just finally decided, "That's it, I'm done, I'm never coming out ever again," thing, maybe then I would be like, "Cool, maybe that's the right time to stop DJing." But, I'd still be doing music in some form or another. Maybe I'd just be doing my Second Skin stuff or whatever, but, getting to express yourself through music and, have a life or career that's based almost entirely from a passion point of view is such a blessing, and it's not always easy, but, I don't take that for granted, really.
Yeah, no, it's so cool. It's I think about you guys as like the first generation of like kind of
Yeah,
superstar DJs in Australia,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, like you guys would, yeah, he's just much better at it than most of the others. And I mean, you must have experienced some epic gigs along the way because it was pretty wild in the like 90s and the 2000s. Can you think of any like standout gigs?
Oh, so many, so many. I think just almost all gigs are good back then. It was like almost an anomaly to get a shitty gig, to get
Yep.
a gig people weren't into it, they were just, all of the, fuzzy breaks parties were epic. Getting to travel overseas a lot during that time as well, getting to play at Fabric in London, getting to play Tea in the Park, which is a huge festival in Scotland where we played actually before Milo at the peak of his career, and having people in the crowd with like Aussie flags and blow up kangaroos, and
Wow.
it was just wild,
And
so
what was Fabric like?
Oh, at that point in time, it was just epic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like an incredible vibe. People, a lot of Aussies there, so yeah, you feel like you're getting like a lot of hometown support at those gigs, and they were so,
Mm.
and it wasn't like that was sort of pre, I guess, social media, so it wasn't like it was like you were in people's faces all the time, so they really came out to see and support you. So it was really, really, really quite special. But yeah, that was awesome gigs. They were really, really, really incredible. So yeah, I just that whole period was just amazing, And I still look
Yeah.
back and go, I'm so glad that was sort of like, you know, the peak time for me as a DJ. It was the best. I reckon probably the best time really to be DJing. It was just at that point where it has sort of shifted from underground towards mainstream, but wasn't fully commercial yet. So it's just that perfect transition. And I think that's one of the things I'm gonna, cover in the book, is like what made the early 2000s so awesome. And that was one of the things, was just that transitional period. Well, there's lots of things, but
Yeah.
that was
Kind of
one.
like the perfect storm, hey?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. I was watching a podcast with a house DJ, Nick Fanciulli,
Oh yeah.
and he was saying that like he can remember nearly every gig from the late 90s to about 2010. And then from
Yeah.
then on, he said, I couldn't like tell you any of them. Like you said, it's just
Really?
after 2010, it's not had that same, it's not been quite as special. And I think, oh, wow,
No.
it's like weird because
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't going out as much. Maybe it's our generation that's made it so special, but
Well, I think it was more special, and I'm not saying that to be like, "It was better in my day," but
yeah,
it really was. I think one of the key factors was that DJs were the DJs were the ones that brought that sound to the people back then, because there was no other way to access the music, right?
yep,
So DJs, in order to get in order to hear a lot of that music in the late 90s and early 2000s, you had to actually, you know, a DJ had to go to a record store, buy the music, and then take it to a club so you could hear it. That was the only way to access it. So DJs were the access point. So their value was there was a lot more value. They held a lot more value than they do now, right? I guess a lot of people would see DJs these days as just people who play the music that everybody has access to, right?
yep,
But back then it was like, no, only the DJs had access to that music, right? So, and you had to go to clubs to hear it. So if you had all those factors coming together and you were passionate about the music, when you went to the event and you finally got to hear that track, which you couldn't hear all week because it wasn't accessible, there was a real passion and an excitement about that. And I think, since the internet really took over, I think that's changed because the accessibility has changed, like, DJs don't even really get advanced promos anymore. They usually get promos the same time that it gets put on Spotify because labels want to drive Spotify plays. So they don't really care about club plays. They care about streaming. So um, yeah, so I think it's different. The focus has totally shifted. So those times were special just by the way they were.
yeah. Oh man, I've got just a few more questions for you. What's coming up in the future? Any collabs or anything like exciting that you can share?
Um, yeah, I actually, you know what? Because I just put out an album, called The Album Not Album. And so the album not album concept is basically comes from what we were discussing earlier about how a lot of what I play in my sets now is my own music. And so I've been putting out this music a lot with the DJ focus and just putting them out as like DJ promos or singles. And, I think people picked up on bits and pieces here and there, but probably didn't realize when they went out to a gig that, oh, that's all his music kind of thing. So I sort of decided I'll package it all together, as an album that you can stream, but I'm also just about to put out a mixtape version of it, which has a lot of my reworks on there. And I think that's just going to give a really good picture of what I do at the moment, right, as a DJ and as a producer. So that's out at the moment. It's not all super brand new music. Some of it's a couple of years old, but it's a good summary of where I'm at. And that actually inspired me. After that, I was like, oh, you know what? I was sort of more doing it as just like as an exercise, but then the feedback I got is that people really dug it and really enjoyed it, and I was like, oh, I hadn't really considered doing an actual album of original music before, but that actually kind of inspired me to do that. So that's one. Okay, long story short, that's one thing that I'm going to be working on, I
Yeah.
guess, next year. I have got a couple of collabs I've been sitting on for way too long that I'm gonna probably finish for that album. One's with some really old school hip hop guys, some real pioneers of hip hop. So anyway, that's one concept. Another one that I'm working on is the book on early 2000s dance music. And that is, yeah, so that's gonna be not really a history so much of like, here's all the clubs and here's all the DJs that were around in the early 2000s. It's more like a snapshot of what made the
Your
culture.
story.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, what made the culture so unique and special. Just the different factors, like the fact that we played vinyl, the fact that, there was no social media and no phones in clubs, or, clubs was the only place to hear the music. So, and then coupled with a lot of nostalgic sort of photos. So that's the sort of main two projects. And I do have another book idea for next year because next year is my 30th anniversary of DJing. So I did have another concept for that, sort of. But knowing my speed at the moment, I'm not sure I'll get to it.
So much to do. Not enough
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I've just got some rapid fire questions for you here. Not rapid fire, but I mean, this could be anywhere around the world. But what's your favorite club that you've played in?
Ooh. I think there's been different clubs for different reasons. So I'd say the Green and Jazzy events at the Burdekin because they were my first ever gigs. Tweaking actually back in the day was always amazing at Club 77. The Globe back in the day was incredible. Um, and I also used to love going to Fabric over in London. And then what else was there? I think, a lot of I'm really loving a lot of the reunion parties as well, whatever form they take. They always seem to be pretty
Yeah.
crazy at the moment.
Oh, they're huge, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really,
Massive. They're always sold out. I've been to a couple. It's just
it's like,
like it is like going back in time. It's nuts.
it is literally like going back in time.
Yeah, so good. I have to go to the next one. This would be way too hard to answer, but all-time favorite tune?
Oh God, yes, that is a really tough one to answer. But I will mention one of them. And as far as DJing goes, because I'm working on a track at the moment that takes a bit of inspiration from that, and that's The Gate by Plum DJs, which I think was sort of big-ish, but wasn't their biggest tune. And I just used to love that because it just was like the perfect harmony of sort of the psychedelic rave thing and breakbeats. And I've got a bit of that going on in my latest track. So I'll say that one for today.
Awesome. Weirdest thing you've seen at a gig?
Oh, when I was DJing at Sounds on Sunday in Sydney one time, this guy came up to me who had a glass eye and popped it out basically onto the decks and onto the floor in front of me.
Oh, no.
And I didn't know what to make of it at the time because I was like, I didn't realize it was a glass eye. And I was like, I thought this guy was just really off his head and he was trying to pop his actual
Oh,
eyeball.
no.
Like, what's this? What's this? And it just went pop. And I was like, what just happened? And funnily enough, speaking of reunion parties, he came up to me and was like, do you remember me? I was the guy that did this and put my eye. And I was like, yes, I do remember you. I do remember you. I don't often remember people from those days, but I remember you.
Oh, man, I used to know a guy on the Sunshine Coast who he had a glass eye, and if you were at a bar drinking with him, you'd like turn around to talk to someone, and then you'd turn around and he'd have it in your like bourbon and
Oh,
coke or whatever. He was an animal.
oh my God. Makes me squirm.
Yeah. Yeah. What in Australia? What's been the most surprising city that's been good? I mean, I'm sure you've been to some like rural places where it's actually gone off.
Yeah, look, yes, I'm trying to think of what was really, really good. I mean, it's often some of the small towns which can go off the hardest. Actually, way back in the day, I think one of my favorite gigs was going down south in Western Australia. I think it was Yallingup actually. And yeah, that was not something that I expected to be epic, but it was just this cool gig by these vineyards. Had a mini stage set up. It was like a little mini festival, and it was just such a vibe. I don't know. It was just one of my sticks out as one of my favorite sort of gigs, I guess, over the years. Yeah, just it's funny when you
Weird
go.
ones. Yep.
Yeah, when you go to those small towns, sometimes it can go either way. Sometimes it'd be just like, "What the hell is this shit you're playing?" And then other times it could be just like the best gig ever. And actually, a similar thing happened when I was traveling in England back in the day, and we went down to Cornwall, in the south of England, and there was this place called Penzance where the Pirates of Penzance came
Little
from.
surfing village. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and it was this small little place we used to play. I've forgotten the name right now, and they're going to kill me for it. And it was such a little vibe. It was like a small little sort of seaside town. It was just like different generations of people, different walks of life, all coming together, all just loving it. So, yeah, just always so cool finding those little places.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
And I often forget to ask this question, but what's the BPM? Like, what do you think is the ideal BPM for a nightclub?
Yeah, you know what? I tend to I have drifted over the years, and I do tend to drift, but I tend to I think my home base tends to be around 128. That seems to be my sort of for what I do, that seems to be the middle ground or
And that has been the most common answer, hey,
Really?
from the people that I've remembered to ask.
Oh,
Most
really?
people have said 128, whether they're house music or yeah,
Really?
yeah,
It is very common. It is very
yeah,
common, and it sits perfectly between, like sometimes breaks can get up to like 132 or 135, and then it can, some of the funkier stuff I was doing is sort of more that sort of house-ish tempo at 123, but 128 just seems to sit just nicely there in the middle, and it's just
yeah.
safe. Yeah, it seems like a safe sort of tempo, I guess. Seems to work for me.
Unreal. Oh, um, I was gonna. You don't care if I call you your real name, Jesse? Thanks heaps for coming on, man. This has been awesome,
Yeah, it's
and
really good. Loved it.
yeah, I'll have to come and check you out next time you're in Brisbane. When's the next Brisbane show?
It hasn't been announced yet, but it is the 6th of December.
Oh,
So the show,
whereabouts?
um, I can't say yet, but
Oh, okay. Is it a big? Is it a big show?
it'll be a good one. Yes, it'll be a
Oh,
big one.
cool.
Yep. Oh, actually, no. The next one is I'm doing Ministry of Sound Classical. Sorry, in November. So that'll be with the full orchestra and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
That'll be a big show. Yeah.
Yeah, River Stage or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So I need to start getting some new edits and stuff together for that. Actually.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Unreal. Awesome. Oh, man. Thanks again, legend.
No worries. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it.